Here's it's my fantasy footballing 11. We've got Taffarel in goal, best Brazilian and South American goalkeeper of the 1990s, possibly of all time from South America, and possibly one of the best top five goalkeepers from the 90s and the 2000s. Nailed down the number one spot for Brazil for the better part of a decade. Hard to dislodge him from the number one spot. Possibly could have played at the 2002 World Cup as well, but didn't. But World Cup winner, deservedly so, and revolutionised the position somewhat. A lot of goalkeepers now are better coming off their line, being a sweeper keeper like Manuel Neuer. He was a hybrid sweeper keeper. He would play on the edge of his box a lot, wouldn't fully charge out. And as South American goalkeepers go, he was very competent. Not as many mistakes as other South American goalkeepers, and not as many what happens next moments and hands hidden behind the hands hiding the eyes there. Of course, his contemporaries from South America at the time were like Rene Higuita. So you can see, the style of goalkeeping that was coming out of South America in the 80s and the 90s, and Taffarel, bit different, a bit more European in his outlook and his style of play, but still had that South American passion and moments of you want to hide your head in your hands. But as it goes, pretty good goalkeeper. Now we look at the back four. We start with Javier Zanetti from Inter at right back. He could play any position in the back four and any position in the midfield. Very utility player, if I could call it that, and possibly one of the most solid defensive minded players you'll find in the modern era. Recently retired a few years ago. Played, I think, 17 seasons at Inter. Played a few seasons in Argentina when he was younger, when he was a teenager. Goes over to Europe and becomes Mr. Inter. He played in a very, very good Inter side and was instrumental in leading them to that Champions League triumph a few years back when Mourinho was manager of Inter. And deservedly so. He'd been on some Inter sides that hadn't quite peaked. He played alongside the great Ronaldo when Ronaldo was a young teenager and when he was young as well, so they were teammates. And then, of course, next to him at centre-back is Paolo Maldini, Mr. Milan. AC Milan legend, like his father. 20 or 22-year career. Retired at the age of 40. Now he's a club president and things like that, and he's still involved in the game behind the scenes. But my God, what an absolute machine Maldini was. It's a pity he didn't win the World Cup and he wasn't part of the 2006 World Cup side. But some of his AC Milan teammates were, and he wasn't. But yeah, by that point, I don't think World Cup football would have been his thing. He would have not had the pace or to keep up with the modern international game. But as a club level, Champions League legend, Serie A legend. So many winners' medals in his cabinet. Part of some really great AC Milan sides. Played alongside some brilliant players, including some of those who are on this board. And next to him, former international teammate and World Cup winning captain Fabio Cannavaro, possibly the shortest centre back you'll ever see. Not very tall as a centre back. He's actually, I think, the shortest out of the back four. Even Graham Rousseau, I think, is a bit taller than him. The shortest centre back you'll ever see, but his spatial awareness and his positioning made up for his lack of height, and deservedly lifted the World Cup in 2006. He obviously Euro 2000 alongside Paolo Maldini missed out against the French in extra time, and I remember watching that final and crying because it was just it was David Trezeguet who again hasn't made the board, but was famed for his time in Serie A. Look at these players he played in Serie A. 1, 2, 3 already. That shows how good that league was in the 90s and the early 2000s, that this level of player was coming out of that league. It's declined somewhat and is slowly making its way back up. But, we have to look at 3 out of the back 4 are league legends of Italian football. Obviously, Cannavaro's got a younger brother as well who played for Napoli. He's from Napoli, and his career is Mr. Juventus. He ended his career at Real Madrid, but he is Mr. Juventus as well for his time there, famous time there. Moving on to Graham Rousseau, possibly the most underrated left back England's ever produced, and possibly one of the best at his position. Since retiring, he's forged a career in the media. He's now a very, very good journalist. He writes the occasional article in newspapers, and he's also a TV presenter. He could have gone down the coaching route, decided to go down the media route, and I can't blame him. Um, Famed for his spells at Chelsea and Blackburn, won the Premier League with Blackburn, won the FA Cup with Chelsea. Um, Played in Chelsea sides that were pre-Abramovich. I think his last season was when Abramovich bought the club. So he's pre-Abramovich here at Chelsea. This is when Chelsea didn't have a lot of money and were basically bankrupt. But they had Vialli and Zola and Di Matteo in the side. He was playing with some very, very good players, was Graham Massot. So therefore he didn't have to be a star player. He could be a solid defensive player, but he could also play on the left wing if need be. He could play further forward and could go up and down the left flank all day long. And when England had an issue with left-footed players, not enough of them in the side, he should have and could have got more appearances for England. There's no English player on this board that deserved more appearances, but Graham Massot was playing for a Chelsea side that was not the best Chelsea side. Had some great Chelsea legends in it, but if you look at the Chelsea side since Abramovich has taken over, this Chelsea side that he was playing in were not at the Premier League competing level. They were a mid-table Premier League side at the time. But played his last few seasons under Claudio Ranieri, and retired, I think, a Chelsea legend and a Blackburn legend when he did finally hang up his boots. Also famed for getting in a fight in the Champions League with Gareth Batty, a Blackburn teammate, against CSKA Moscow in a group stage game and breaking his hand by punching Batty so hard in the face, which I find amusing now, but at the time, as a Blackburn fan and as a kid, I was horrified by what I was seeing, and my dad was like, okay, right, why do you support this team again? Because my dad was a Liverpool fan. So I got some abuse from my father for the fact that like two of our key players were kicking lumps out of each other on the pitch rather than the opposition. Now they head to the midfield. I've gone for a 4-4-2. It's just easier to lay out the ball, but you can go for a 4-3-3 if you want, or a 4-5-1, or a diamond formation. Whatever formation you choose in the comments section is your formation. But I've gone for a 4-4-2 with Overmars on the right wing. Now he can play on either wing, two-footed player. This is why Dennis Bergkamp didn't get in this side, is he's only got 1 foot. You've got to be able to use both feet, and Dennis Bergkamp could just not use his left foot. Mark Overmars, though, had a great partnership with Bergkamp when he would run down the left or right wing, link in with Bergkamp, who could then link in with Henry, and vice versa. You could play Overmars up front if Henry or Bergkamp wasn't 100%. You could play him up front. You could bring him as an impact player. Instrumental in the Arsenal sides in the late 90s and early 2000s under Arsene Wenger's management. Part of the Invincibles. There's a reason why he's on the board. He also came from that Dutch school of Ajax, alongside Bergkamp and the De Boer brothers, and Van der Sar. There were some great Dutch players in the 90s and the 2000s. I mean, Clarence Seedorf doesn't even make this lineup, which says something about some of the players that I have selected. But Mark Overmars as a winger, short, powerful and fast. Low centre of gravity, very quick. And I would happily, if he was playing today, he would, if he was a young player today, I think he would have a very, 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 very good career. Possibly better than what he did when he was playing, because it's now easier to score goals in both league and international level. At the time he was playing in the 90s, goal scoring was dipping a little bit and the game had become more defensive, and I would say players were getting overcoached, and that was a bit too much structure for some players. Overmars was a player that loved space to run into. Much like his left wing partner, I put Ronaldinho on the left wing. Even though he could dominate at centre midfield, he at his peak he had very quick feet. The way he could move the ball along dribbling, his dribbling ability is second to none. His dead ball ability is second to none, and his movement is second to none. And he always played football with a smile on his face. Now he's famed for his spells at AC Milan and Barcelona. He's an honorary president at Barcelona now. He's retired. He's given an honorary position there. But he also had a very, very good career at AC Milan as well. Absolutely brilliant player. I don't think you could say Ronaldinho shouldn't be in a fantasy 11. Possibly the best Brazilian midfielder of the last 20 years. Only retired a few months ago, which he could have got another year out of him, but he's 38. I think he's the youngest player on the board as well. He's the youngest out of this lineup. So he would be the baby of the group. His career, he reaches his peak much later than everyone else because he's younger than everyone else. But you've got to see, he played alongside Paolo Maldini and this guy Shevchenko. And he would be playing against Cannavaro and Zanetti and giving them nightmares. And Zidane when he was at Barcelona. He gave some of the other, also his fantasy teammates nightmares on the pitch because he was almost impossible to tackle or mark because of his movement and the way he played the game and the joy he played the game with. Um, Obviously well remembered for his goal against England in 2002 on the way to the World Cup final, where he chips David Seaman from about 40 yards with a free kick. Whether he meant it or not, we'll never know. But one of his highlights of his career was that goal. Another highlight was winning the 2002 World Cup with Brazil and basically being the main man for that World Cup. That's where he burst onto the scene and became a superstar. And his career, he's won Champions Leagues and La Liga titles and Serie A titles, and to be honest, rightly deserves from the board. I could have played him in the middle, but that would be very difficult because the two centre midfielders I've got would not like that. And I've obviously gone Zidane, possibly the best offensive midfielder you're going to find. You could possibly play him as a false 10, as an attacking midfielder. You could play him deep, but Zidane, for me, I remember watching him in the 90s at Juventus when he was actually a magician. Serie A in the 1990s was far better than the Premier League and far better than La Liga or the Bundesliga. It was the league to play in, and English players were going over to play in Serie A and doing quite well. But Zinedine Zidane, his time at Juventus, he played alongside some brilliant players, and he played against players like Paolo Maldini and a young Fabio Cannavaro, who then became his teammate at Real Madrid, but revolutionised the way the game is played. His skill level is second to none. But he retired quite young comparatively, if you think about it. He retired only in 2006. I think he possibly could have got a few more years out of Zidane, but he felt that was the time to retire. And instrumental in demolishing Brazil in the '98 World Cup final. Absolutely instrumental in winning that game and outplaying the Brazilian midfield, which you don't normally think a European side could outplay a South American side in midfield at times. You would think that the skill level that the South Americans would have would counteract the physicality and the power of a European side, but he played football like a South American. But also he could tackle as well. He could be a bit physical, but when he got the ball at his feet, it was very hard to get it off him. And some of his Champions League exploits as well were well famed. And some of his Champions League final winning goal in 2002 is therefore to see against Bayer Leverkusen. But alongside him in the midfield is Matt Le Tissier, one club man, one of only two one club men on the board, played his entire professional career at Southampton. And because he played for Southampton, possibly that harmed his England career because he played for an unfashionable club that was struggling in the Premier League rather than a club like your Liverpool, your Man United, your Arsenal. He decided to keep and stay. He could have moved from Southampton and gone on to a better club or a bigger club, a club that had more chance of winning or competing for silverware. He spent his entire career at Southampton, and fair play to him. He is known as the English Zidane. Similar skill level, and also his spot kick taking. He only missed one penalty in his career. He got 47 out of 48 spot kicks he converted. Famous best game of his career, his hat trick against Man United in a 5-1 drubbing they gave Man United in the 90s. He retired the year that they moved to St Mary's. He played at the old Dell. The Dell had a very, very, very muddy pitch. Yeah, no, famed for his work ethic, and he was a great captain of that Southampton side. A Southampton side that regularly needed a pick me up because was getting hammered left, right, and centre. They were a team that were struggling in the Premier League at the time when he was playing. Hence, I think that probably harmed his chances to play more games for England. Plus, he was considered a bit overweight at times, a bit on the podgy side, a bit slow. He made up for his lack of pace again with great spatial awareness and quick feet. But at the time he was playing, there were also some very other good English midfielders coming through. You had a lot of the Man United, Beckham, Butt, Scholes. You had Darren Anderton at Tottenham. You had McManaman at Liverpool. there were a lot of good English midfielders at the time he was playing that he would have had to compete with, who were slightly quicker and slightly fitter. Whether he would have done better in an England shirt than some of them is yet to be determined. But notice, David Beckham doesn't get the ball, but Matt Le Tissier does. I would feel Matt Le Tissier could score more goals from open play, unlike David Beckham, and could bring more players into play, unlike David Beckham. David Beckham was famed for his wide crossing from the right and his set plays. Matt Le Tissier, okay, famed for penalties, but could also score some brilliant individual goals and team goals. That's why he gets in the side. Very underrated player. Now we get to the two centre forwards. We're going to start with Gabriel Batistuta, famed for his spell at Fiorentina. And some of the goals he scored for Fiorentina and Argentina are amazing to behold. I could have gone with Hernan Crespo, who's that little bit younger, but Gabriel Batistuta should have possibly had a shot in playing in the Premier League. Didn't get that opportunity. I think he would have flourished in the Premier League because he is a sniper, absolute sniper. But played most of his career in Italy. Again, when he was at Fiorentina, he was the main man. When the two Milan clubs, Juventus, Roma, Lazio, all these other clubs had some big strikers, he was one of the top goal scorers in Serie A in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s. He was one of the best strikers in the world. And he played for a Fiorentina side that wasn't necessarily the best Fiorentina side. They were an upper mid-table Serie A side. Imagine if he played for an AC Milan or a Juventus or a Roma, he might have won more. And yeah, I think he would have suited the Premier League in the late 90s, early 90s. I think he would have got a hatful of goals. His spatial awareness, his positioning. He's also quite a physical player. He took a fair few blows, and that's one of the reasons why he retired. His ankles were so had it. He had to retire because he could barely sleep. He was in so much pain, but he played through the pain barrier. But I think the Premier League might have suited his style of play. A lot of South Americans did go to the Premier League to various levels of success, and we can debate their levels of success in other videos. But then you've got to look at the strike partner I've chosen for him, which is Andrei Shevchenko. AC Milan legend, obviously Dinamo Kiev legend, and spent a brief spell at Chelsea. But by the time he got to Chelsea, he was well past his best days were behind him. But he gave the Premier League a shot. I think he gave the Premier League a shot far too late. But when he was playing at AC Milan, they were one of the top teams in the world. And Chelsea hadn't won a Champions League at that point when he moved. AC Milan had the history and the success. And at the time, I think Chelsea weren't willing to pay the money, or any Premier League club, to get him to move in his peak. I think, again, Shevchenko at his fittest and at his peak, again, the Premier League would have been, he would have ripped the Premier League to pieces. Let's have a look at the players that played in the Premier League. Premier League players. We've got Lasseau, Le Tissier, Overmars, Shevchenko. Only 4 Premier League players make it into my fantasy 11. Now, let's look at the players that played the majority of their careers, or are famed for their careers, in Serie A. Obviously, Zanetti, Maldini, Cannavaro. Zidane, his early career, yes. Batistuta, Shevchenko, Ronaldinho. Look at that for a lineup. More players played in Serie A than in the Premier League. That is how good Serie A was in the 1990s and the early 2000s. It was the league to play in. It really was. And I do feel that possibly Shevchenko possibly could have come to the Premier League earlier in his career. Definitely Batistuta should have given it a go. But most of the Premier League clubs at that time, apart from 1 or 2, didn't really have the money that they do now. Abramovich really changed the landscape of the transfer market and spending when he was the first billionaire owner of a football club. Now we look at the manager, and we've gone for Marcello Lippi. World Cup winning manager, Serie A winning manager. The way he brought that Italian team together in 2006 with all the controversy surrounding the domestic game and the negativity and the negative headlines and the scandal to do with the match-fixing scandal, which has damaged the Italian game irreparably in my eyes. I think that's why Italian football is in the position it is 12 years later. He brought a team together that was solid at the back and had scoring by committee. There wasn't a one outstanding, right, let's give it to this guy, he's going to put 10 goals in for us or 5 goals win the Golden Boot. The team ethic, it was a sum of its parts. Yes, there were some world-class players, but it had a very good work ethic. This guy could possibly get all these star players to work as a team. That's why Lippi is manager for me. I could have gone with Ancelotti. I could have gone with Bobby Robson. Sir Bobby Robson, I think, could have been the manager. Had he still been alive, I think he, because still had much to give to the game. Sadly, he passed away a few years ago, to Bobby Robson. But I went with Lippi because he managed to do it at international level as well, at club level. And that is my fantasy footballing 11. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for getting to the end of the video. And yeah, please feel free in the comments section to place your fantasy 11 in there. But here are some of the criteria. The players must have retired and they must have played and you must have seen them in your lifetime. That is the criteria for a fantasy 11. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Place your comments below and I'll have some more videos for you soon.